Hello, my name is Jeanie LoVetri, and this is the Jeanie LoVetri Show, Our Vocal Universe. This is a show about all things that have to do with the voice. We are going to see many interesting experts on this program that have to do with voice in many different directions. We'll see performers, teachers, voice doctors, voice researchers, speech teachers, all sorts of folks that have to do with the voice. And so today we're going to have a wonderful guest, and I want to tell you a little bit about him. David Sabella is an internationally recognized master teacher in voice technique and pedagogy. That's the teaching of teaching. He has starred on and off Broadway and in opera productions as a countertenor throughout the United States and Europe, and has appeared as principal soloist at both Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center numerous times. He was the executive program director of the Broadway Theater Project and is a two-term president of the New York Singing Teachers Association. He is also an adjunct professor of voice at Montclair State University in New Jersey and Fordham University at the Lincoln Center campus. So I'm very excited and delighted to welcome my guest, David Sabella. Hi, David.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you could come. It's so fun to have you here. The first thing I want to find out about is your singing. How was it that you became a singer? What led you down that path? And what was it that propelled you to become a professional?
Well, I don't think I had much of a choice. I was raised in a family of singers. My mother was a singer. My brother was a singer. My brother was on Broadway by the time I was just in double digits, in,
and your brother's name is
Ernie Sabella, who has a long history of many, many years of being on Broadway.
Yes.
And so singing was just what you did. We just sang and acted. You know, it was either going to be singing or acting. I knew it was going to be one of those. And I had auditions for college at the same time at this one school at SUNY Purchase in the acting department and the voice department. And when I got to the parking lot, I took a left turn instead of a right turn and wound up at the music department, and that was it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so when did you first sing publicly?
Publicly or professionally?
Well, either.
Okay. So publicly, I mean, a little kid, you know, publicly in church and at school and all sorts of things. My first professional gig was as the corporal in Shenandoah for a production of Shenandoah with John Cullum in the lead. And it was a regional production, but they hired 2 local boys to be in the show. And I was one of them, and I was the corporal.
Wow.
I got paid to do that. I was 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Gee, that's a wonderful first thing.
Yeah.
What's your favorite repertoire now? What do you do when you're singing now?
Yeah, that changes. Changes with age, changes almost day by day. What I am currently in love with now is the American Songbook. How all of those songs have such a life beyond boundaries of race or gender or economic status. I mean, the truth to those songs is so universal. And putting together these shows that I'm doing now, these cabaret shows and concerts, really exploring all that great repertoire of Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra and, you know.
Tell our audience what the Great American Songbook refers to. What is that? So
Great American Songbook is a catalog of songs, we might say from the early 30s, Tin Pan Alley, and it keeps expanding all the way up to, I would say there are some songs in modern repertoire we would consider part of the Great American Songbook, like certainly John Kander and Fred Ebb. A lot of their songs are now in the Great American Songbook. Jerry Herman, songs from Broadway. Most of these songs were written for Broadway in the early part of the century. when at a time when popular music drew from Broadway,
Right.
that popular music came from Broadway. Now we're having an experience where it's almost just the opposite.
the other way.
Popular music is fueling Broadway and coming to Broadway.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we speak of the Great American Songbook, we're talking about all those songs that have been recorded by lots of different people for decades in many different ways. They're very adaptable and flexible as repertoire, and they are the songs we hear in so many different places that we maybe don't recognize the name, but we know the songs. It's a familiar song. The next question I want to ask you is, when did you start to teach singing?
Well, I initially started right out of college. Friends would ask me to teach. And at that time, I will admit, I parroted back what worked for me and what my teacher taught me. And I did that for several years with success. And then I started studying how to teach and studying the pedagogy, which is the teaching how to teach,
Right.
like the science and study of voice. And then my term as part of New York Singing Teachers Association, as part of NYSTA, I took all of their professional development courses, which you were very instrumental in developing, which kind of really changed my life, Jeanie, I have to tell you.
That's good, David.
Yeah, they really were. There are 5 courses. If you don't know about this, the New York Singing Teachers Association offers 5 courses for any singer or any teacher who's interested in the voice. Their vocal health, vocal anatomy, voice acoustics, developmental repertoire, and comparative pedagogy. Jeanie developed the set of courses, and during my presidency, I pushed for getting those courses available online and on demand. So due to her efforts and mine, you can see them from the comfort of your own home in your jammies.
Yeah, and if you know anybody that's wanting to teach singing, this is a good place to start.
Yeah.
What is your point of view about teaching? Do you have a certain philosophy? One of the things that I know is that you sing lots of different kinds of sounds.
I do.
How did you develop that, and how does that influence what you do with your students?
I have always sung many different types of sounds. I never planned it. I discovered it. Discovered that I had a soprano voice in college and started using that for fun. And lo and behold, this was just around the time that countertenors began to have a resurgence in the late 80s, early 90s. And that sort of fell into my lap. I could do that, and it sounded really good, and so I went in that direction. What I loved about that, and why I chose that in classical music rather than the sort of more lyric tenor stuff, was the roles that I got to do as a countertenor were Julius Caesar and Oberon. They were powerful male roles who just happened to sing like a girl, you know. And the roles that I would otherwise have done, I was not a Rodolfo voice. I was not a dramatic tenor voice.
Yeah.
You know, I was a lirico leggero. So all the roles that end in ino, you know, Nemorino, you know, all the Rinuccio, all those things, all those roles that end in a vowel, you know.
Right. So let me just clarify for the audience, a countertenor is someone who is singing, as David referred to just now, in a kind of feminine sounding quality. And it's a very important part of classical music. There are roles written for that voice type. And actually, there are many different kinds of roles for that. But it is a special kind of way to sing, and it's not something that all men can just do. But he happened to have been particularly gifted in this area. And of course, he also has his lower voice that is available and also wonderful. So tell us about that, too.
Well, that is a tenor, and as I grow older, a little dipping into baritone, you know. As a colleague of mine said recently, came to one of my shows and said, "I didn't realize what a baritone you were." I went, "Well, neither did I." So, you know, I just believe in full range of expression. If you have it, use it.
That's a perfect lead-in to the clip that we're going to see just now. We have a wonderful clip of a recent performance that David did at the Metropolitan Room. That's a cabaret here in Manhattan. And in this performance, he gives us both sides of his voice, both the things that we just talked about. And David, do you want to set that clip up for us?
Is this the Quiet Thing, or is this?
No, Quiet Thing is the next one.
Okay, so this is the Eltonge.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and the Chicago.
Oh, both together. Okay, so the first one is a song written for Julian Eltonge by Jerome Kern, and Julian Eltonge was a megastar at the turn of the century, early aughts and teens of the 19th century, 1910, 1914, and he was Broadway's first countertenor. He always appeared in his shows as the lead male, singing as a tenor, who for some reason in the plot had to then get into a dress and become the lead female of the show. And he went back and forth singing male and female voices all night. And this really made him a megastar until the morality laws of the 1930s kicked in. And that prevented him from ever appearing in a dress again, and essentially killed his career. There is a theater on 42nd Street, the AMC Empire Movie Theater. Mm-hmm. It was the Eltonge Theater. If you walk into that theater, the box office is now ensconced by the original proscenium. And above the proscenium is a fresco of 3 beautiful women. Those are actually all Julian Eltonge in 3 of his most famous roles, and it still stands there today. So this first clip is him singing Come Hither Eyes, well, me, singing.
As him.
Yeah, singing Come Hither Eyes, written by Jerome Kern. Then right after that, the second clip is just a short excerpt of the end of We Both Reached for the Gun, which is from the Broadway musical Chicago, in which I did appear and co-star in for almost 10 years.
And I chose this clip because of the many different wonderful songs that David did in this performance. These two are very contrasting vocally, and he's quite wonderful in both these songs that are so different. So now let's watch that clip.
Come hither, look in her eyes. That signifies I kind of like you. Each precious little dear at 16 starts out on her wild career of breaking a heart with that. Come hither, look in her eyes. And when she sighs, I'm oh so lonely. Men fall like autumn leaves, but still each one believes the look that lies and lies and lies in those come hither. Don't reach for the
Okay, that was fabulous. That was amazing. What a wonderful display of the diversity of a voice and how we as professionals can learn to sing in so many different ways.
And coming from you, that is a great compliment.
Thank you, David. Now, I want to talk about what the hard parts are, what's challenging both as a teacher and as a singer, well, what is it that you have to really think about or work on or really bring your full attention to?
Two things. Pardon me. Two things. As a singer, being able to do all of these different things, it's important to actually keep up the working on all of these different things. Weeks can go by where I'm singing in one voice and I have to remember, oh, I better warm up the other. I better, give some attention to the other half of the instrument. And that's the same with all of my students. If you're in a show where you're primarily belting, you better warm up your soprano voice and keep both halves of the instrument equally functioning and ready to go in a minute.
Yes, and that's something that we share in philosophy and in life experience that we didn't know about until we met each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for people to understand that David doesn't possess these ideas that no one's ever heard of, or me, that no one's ever heard of, that these are important ideas in pedagogy, again, that's the teaching of singing, because they're valid across a wide range of philosophies and people.
Yes. The second thing I would say is the hardest thing for me with teaching, and truly this is the hardest thing, is remembering that my student is on their journey. I'm on my journey in my career as a teacher and a singer, but they're on their journey. And they get to make the decisions. They decide what they want to do. Sometimes I roll my eyes at some of the decisions, but I have to step back and I give good counsel. But in the end, it's their journey. And I know for a fact, my voice teacher must have rolled her eyes when I was in college at some of the decisions I made. But you have to let each person live their life and have their career. There have been many a student I thought, this person is not going to do it. And they proved me wrong. Mm-hmm. And they are stars on Broadway. Right. And there are just as many that I thought, okay, this person has it all. And things happen in life. And it doesn't happen for whatever reason.
Yes, I've had that experience too.
So I can't judge. I can't decide for anybody else what their life is going to be.
You can't. All you can do is work with them as they are in that moment.
That's right.
And intend for the best possible good that you can do, and then the rest kind of goes where it goes.
Right.
Do you work with children?
I used to. I have 2 children, so I had a sort of benchmark knowing their developmental, age and what their attention span was. I will rarely work with children after an audition, after I get to see uniquely with them what their attention span is. Some kids, they can't handle it, And I get a lot of calls for, I want to have my 5-year-old have, I'm like, no, not at 5, not at 7, not really even at 9. Double digits, starting maturity, puberty. I'd like to wait there because the voice is going to change so drastically, and I don't believe in futzing, and I think when you're young, it should be fun. Yeah. Have them sing in a choir, have them sing in music theater shows. Health and safety, yes, you got to have somebody to say, okay, no, that's screaming. Right. Don't do that. But as far as coming to a voice lesson every week, it could turn them off to that. Yeah. I know I have some 8-year-old. I have an 8-year-old that's her career. Right. She knows it, and I'm like, okay, great. That's your career. We're gonna get there. But they have to really know that. It has to come from them.
I agree. It has to come from them. All right. Now I want to go on to our second clip. So, audience, this is from the same evening of cabaret that David did at Manhattan.
Metropolitan
Room, thank you. But I chose this clip because it's sort of an amalgamation of the 2 sounds we heard in the previous clip, and yet even something that's in between, the sort of a grayer area, but always David is expressive and heartfelt. He's not just making sound for sound's sake. He's talking to you as that person who happens to be singing. So tell us about this one.
This is a clip from, right, as you said, the show I did at the Metropolitan Room. It's A Quiet Thing, written by John Kander and Fred Ebb, originally from Flora the Red Menace. And I purposefully did key this in such a way that I could dip into my lower range and then go right up to the upper, but not really in a feminine way, just as a light sort of haute contre, lyric tenor type of, very light male voice for the expressiveness of this song. It talks about how when everything comes true and you didn't plan it, it still can be the best thing in the world.
And this is our clip.
When it all comes true, just the way you planned. It's funny, but the bells don't ring. It's a quiet thing. When you hold the world in your trembling hand, you'd think you'd hear a choir sing. It's a quiet thing. There are no exploding fireworks. Where's the roaring of the crowd? Maybe it's the strange new atmosphere way up here among the clouds. But I don't hear the drums, I don't hear the band. The sounds, I'm told, such moments bring. Happiness comes in on tiptoe. Well, what do you know? It's a quiet thing, a very quiet thing.
Well, that was beautiful. That's a beautiful song. And it was so expressive and tender and gentle and real. That's what we want singing to be. And we want the voice to be in service to the music and to the expression of the lyrics. David did that beautifully. The whole evening was great, and we want him to do it again.
Thank you.
That'd be nice.
Thank you. I will.
You briefly touched on what you're working on. Are you going to be doing more performances, cabaret or theater? What's to come?
Right. I definitely will be doing more performances, more cabaret performances. I have 2 shows that I'm currently ruminating. One is a show more devoted to the life and repertoire of Julian Eltinge, to bring his story and his repertoire to the forefront.
Which is a very interesting story.
It's beautiful repertoire. Jerome Kern and Irving Berlin wrote for this man.
Yeah, and until I heard you sing this material and talk to you about it, I had never heard of him.
Yeah, yeah. He's a lost treasure. So that will be one show coming up. The second show that I'm planning, and I don't know which one will come first, is just another a cabaret evening more devoted to American songbook standards and my interpretation of them and personalization of them in my life, because that's really what it's all about. And you can always be sure in my shows there'll be multiple octaves.
I like that, multiple octaves.
Multiple octaves in my shows,
Good.
yes.
That's good. Now we may have some budding, fledgling singing people who would like to follow in your footsteps. I would like to know if you have any advice for them.
Sure. My advice, no matter what, is to always be authentic. Your authentic self is what everybody is looking for. That's harder than you might think it is. We don't want you to copy any recordings. We don't want you to sound like anybody else that we already know. We don't really need you to sound perfect. We need it to be authentic. That's the next thing, is your authentic self.
Well, thank you, David. That's wonderful advice. I hope that you've been given lots of great things to think about and to enjoy. I want to thank David for taking the time to come here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want to remind you that this program is about you and your voice just as much as it is about anybody else's. This is a program to make you think about your sound and your voice and what you have to communicate, what it is that you want to share through what you say, and maybe what you sing. That we encourage you to think about it in a positive and good way. Thank you so much, and we will be looking for the next program very soon.